Well, good morning and welcome to the network's, the Marine Fish Conservation Network's Waterside Chat. I am Tom Sadler, the network's Deputy Director, and I will be your host this morning. I am delighted to welcome Captain Lucas Bessette. Lucas is the Executive Director of the American Fly Fishing Trade Association, a fly fishing guide, and a longtime marine conservation advocate. He's also on the network's policy council, and I get to count Lucas as one of my good friends. Lucas and I will be chatting today about AFTA's involvement in marine resource conservation and their efforts that they have underway to educate and inform both the industry and fly fishers and anyone, the public, on engaging policymakers on marine conservation. Before we get started, got a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions, put them in the chat and we'll do our best to get to them. We're recording this chat and it will be available on YouTube, Facebook, and our website as soon as we can get it ready. Now, the big thing is the chats are also now available as podcast episodes on the most popular podcasting apps like Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. Details are on the Waterside Chat section of our website in the Resources tab. I always enjoy chatting with Lucas more times when it's over at a bar as opposed to via Zoom, but we have to live with the world we are dealt with these days. So welcome, Lucas.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, and so let's have the Lucas Bessette story, right? You know, where were you born, where you grew up, went to college, and you know, that kind of thing. Tell us the Lucas Bessette story.
Yeah, well, before we do that, I wanted to say that I've always thought I had a face for radio. So if you want me to record your housekeeping notes and we could play those every time, that I would be more than willing. So that
indeed,
my beautiful voice every time.
A guest announcer.
Yeah, exactly. Like
awesome.
I could do like the Rod Roddy of Waterside Chats.
All right. Wait a minute. Rob Roddy. That's a reference that goes over my balding head or my bald head.
That was The Price is Right, man.
Huh?
Yeah, back when Bob Barker was still on, it was the Rod Roddy.
Bob Barker, I get. Rob Roddy, I don't know. I'll have to check with some more learned people.
Google Rod Roddy.
Yeah, we'll try to at least give references that I can relate to.
Well, I felt like I was in the right genre because I didn't say Drew Carey's an announcer, whatever his name is. So
yeah.
Anyway, right. Well, I'm gonna come on down.
On we go.
I'm gonna come on down. So born in a very small town of Morganza, Louisiana, famous for only two things. One is a spillway that allows the Mississippi River to flow out into the Gulf of Mexico, and the last 30 minutes of Easy Rider were filmed in my tiny town of Morganza.
But it also has Lucas Bessette as a native son.
You know, they haven't put up the sign yet, like home of. I'm waiting. You know, I don't know what I need to accomplish. But...
well, so we have this vast audience now. So I'm going to ask the audience to start the petition drive that Morganza, Louisiana city council, whatever authority they have there, we need to start to recognize Lucas Bessette, Captain Lucas Bessette, as a native son. So there you go.
And sadly, I'm probably related to most of that council.
Oh,
so they should probably do it for me as a relative. But I may ask for that for Christmas from my own.
There you go. Well, this is, you know, we're all about advocacy here, Lucas.
No, I know. I mean, one petition is as good as another, and if it means my name will be in lights, but not infamy, from actual famousness, then I'm in.
That may be hard to avoid the infamy.
Well, I know, especially if you and I sit at a bar.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah. So
born in Morganza, Louisiana. On to
growing up as a young lad in Louisiana for the first, formidable years of my life. Short stint in Missouri, just west of St. Louis. Yeah. Finished high school in Missouri. and then went to college at University of South Florida in Tampa, which Tampa is on my mind today because of Hurricane Ian. But
we all have good friends down there who we are very, very concerned about. So
yes, well, and as someone in Louisiana, I know all about hurricanes. So definitely not something that that we all, wish upon anyone, but unfortunately down here we deal with it, and more because of current events with climate. So college in Florida, moved back to Louisiana in 2004. Felt like coming back home was a good call after college, and started to find my way through a multitude of different jobs. Worked at LSU for a while, Louisiana State University. That was really what got me into the coastal restoration aspect of my life. I spent 7 years there working with a marsh grass breeder, trying to come up with the next best marsh grass to help restore the coast of Louisiana. And fishing has always been a big part of my life. In fact, my fondest memories of me and my dad, who are now estranged, but at the time, he and I, that was where we got along, and that was where all things at the house were forgotten, and living on the water and in the woods at the time was just sort of that solace that I needed as a young kid to keep me out of trouble. And then the fly fishing came into my life actually when I lived in Missouri. My grandmother, step grandmother, gave me a fly rod at 12. Didn't have a clue how to use it, and YouTube didn't exist at that time, so had to figure it out on my own, and floundered my way through, and continue to flounder today. But fly fishing really was a transformative experience for me. It changed a lot about how I looked at a fishery. Louisiana is famous for a lot of things, one of which is it's the sportsman's paradise. And so when you have bountiful fisheries, people tend to take it for granted, and they don't respect it the same way that you would if it were a limited resource. And so I never grew up with the idea of a limit or a law. It was just do what you wanted, and you brought home what you caught, and that was just normal. And so it really became difficult to look outside of the boat when you were focused heavily on what number you were on. And so fly fishing slowed all that down for me, and really changed the way that I looked at an environment and the fishery around me. And so that really changed me, and I'm grateful for it to this day. It made me a better person. It made me obviously a better angler. And today it's made me the executive director of the American Fly Fishing Trade Association. So I'll stop there and, kind of.
Well, let me go back for a sec. One of the both benefits and drawbacks of having you as a close friend is I know some of this, but the audience doesn't. So let's go back to the marsh grass. When I first got to know you, this was something that was clearly of deep interest to you, and maybe a foundational part of what you've become, not just the executive director, but a fly fishing guide and a conservation advocate. But tell us how you got involved in that marsh grass restoration, or what that whole thing was, because if I remember correctly, it opened up that your interest in conservation.
Yeah, absolutely. Louisiana, unfortunately, is the poster child for not only climate change now, but also just the devastating effects that man can have on an environment. And Louisiana loses more land per square foot than anywhere else in this country, simply because the Mississippi River was levied off, and the Mississippi is what fed the sediment to the thriving marsh that we have around it. And so once you cut off that sediment, you cut off the lifeblood that was the marsh. And so Louisiana currently loses about a football field of land every 100 minutes. And that is impossible to ignore if you're out there utilizing the resource. And so I always believed and still do that a guide is a steward. And so after leaving LSU and guiding full time, which is really the transition that I made, I left LSU to start guiding redfish here in Louisiana. And in doing so, I brought with me that sort of conservation ethos that I had learned watching the coast fall into the water, and I wanted to be able to do more. And so we have native black mangroves here in the state, and I had worked with black mangroves at LSU. And so seeing some very minor sort of native stands of them in the area that I fished, I thought that it would be possible for me to collect seeds or propagules and go out and distribute those in sort of a Johnny Appleseed fashion in order to try and help bolster the native stands that were there. But in Louisiana, we find ourselves with all of these funny laws here because we're under Napoleonic Code. And so Louisiana has one of the few places that you can own actual tidal waterways. And so you have to be careful about trespassing. And so I wanted to make sure that that wasn't what I would be doing by stepping onto the land to Johnny Appleseed my way through black mangroves. And so in researching this and talking with the local parish government, we have parishes and not counties here in Louisiana. Another funny thing about us. I discovered that there was a massive interest to actually do something larger than just me going out there. And so that kicked off a project that became what it is today, which is now we're 6 years later. And long story short, we went from me thinking that this was a good idea to Louisiana State University being involved. NASA is actually involved now. We have Orvis and AFTA at the time, before I was a board member, contributed to the Black Mangrove Project. I started a nonprofit many years ago called the Anglers Bettering Louisiana's Estuaries, or ABLE. NOAA is involved through a grant that we just received for their habitat restoration work. So it became something almighty. I mean, we have a local high school that grows the black mangroves, and so the kids get an opportunity to take care of something and actually see something grow, which I believe today is in short supply. Not many people get a chance to actually watch something grow up. I mean, you see everything virtually, and this case in point as we sit here at a Waterside Chat where I'm sitting at a desk in my bedroom. And so it became something and blossomed into something far larger than me and far more important than I'll ever be. And so I will hopefully be a legacy, not for me. I could care less if they say my name, but just that it started something that now people want to replicate. It's given kids a new opportunity to experience something completely different, put down their cell phones for a moment, get their fingers dirty, and actually understand what's happening to the place that some of them, even though they're 10 minutes from, have never been to. And so there's a lot of opportunity there that I'm excited about. And so the Black Mangrove Project is really what, not only started the, sort of the conservation bug within me, but has now made it grow into a monster and has really driven me into what I am now.
Well, that's that's amazing. And of course, when you and I talk, of course, we wind up bouncing ideas off. And what just occurred to me is you're familiar with Trout Unlimited's Trout in the Classroom, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So for folks who don't know, Trout in the Classroom is where in a local grade school, a local Trout Unlimited chapter will put in a trout rearing fish tank, and then the kids grow the fish from little fry all the way up to releasable fish, and then they release them in a local watershed, not unlike the one behind me. And in fact, they have that's Dry River in Harrisonburg, Virginia. But what just dawned on me was, what about mangroves in the classroom, taking what you've just done and amplifying it in other places, so that if the teachers don't want to grow fish, they can grow native plants. It occurs to me that kind of thing that you have done could be a model for the future. And while we won't try to flesh it all out right here, I think you and I might be having a conversation, because there was just legislation introduced about getting kids out on fishing boats and all that. And I think I'd love to see it, and maybe there already is, and somebody in the audience will let me know that there is getting kids involved in conservation. And so, Luke, you are a perfect example of someone who kind of went down that road. Our friend Brandon Schuler's kids have been involved in stuff like that. So I love that idea. I love the fact that you got that conservation bug through real hands-on work. And we'll put the information about the Black Mangrove Project in the show notes. Let's talk about how you wound up going from being a fishing guide of renown, Orvis endorsed, and what is the official?
That was the 2017.
Yeah,
2017 Orvis endorsed Saltwater Guide of the Year.
Yeah. So not a shabby accolade for folks who know the fly fishing world, and especially who know the guiding world. You and I have served on AFTA's board together, but I was not on the board when you became the executive director. Walk the audience through sort of how that played out, because it's an interesting story.
Yeah. So, like you said, well, this, as most things do, this story actually has a circle that revolves around us, because you, Tom Sadler, were instrumental in getting me appointed to the board. I ran for election in 2016 or 17. I don't remember which now. Was not elected, but there was a spot that came open. And so as per our bylaws in the AFTA ranks, we are allowed to appoint someone to the board if there is a seat that needs to be filled. You did that for me, and so I was appointed. A year later, I ran for election and was elected. I started on the AFTA board because of Mr. Tom Sadler, and whether I think that's a good thing or bad thing, I'm not willing to say on this call. But
yeah, there you go.
No, but anyway, so that was kind of the origin story, if you will. If I'm a villain or a hero, I'm not sure yet. It depends on who you ask. But so I moved into from there, just sort of natural progression that happens on any board typically is that, I was on the board it was going on 5 years. I was on the executive committee as the vice chair. I was next in line to be the chair of the board. And in February of 2021,
who can remember the
I can't.
I know it's brutal. It's brutal.
Yeah, all the years are just muddled together, like the
best I can do is pre-COVID, post-COVID.
That's it. Yeah.
Right?
We're PC and PC, like that's it. So yes, I'm pretty sure February of 21, the president at the time resigned from the board, or from his post as the president of AFTA. We went on a nationwide search as a board to replace him. After 310 applications and down to 9 interviews, we were unable to find someone who filled the position in the way that we either wanted or in the way that they wanted, those who applied and had interviewed. And so a good friend of mine, Mr. Jesse Holler from Orvis, who was the chair of the hiring committee, suggested that I apply for the job. I had no intention of applying. It was not in my wheelhouse. I didn't feel like I was in the right person for the job, and so I was reluctant, but he was persistent. And so I talked it over with my family and decided to do it. And I'm proud to say that the board put me through an extremely rigorous process to be in this position. They cut me zero slack. I sat in on the other interviews that happened, and I had by far the most difficult interview of anyone. Rightly so, and it is recorded if anyone ever wanted to see it, if you wanted to sit through that. But yeah, so I was interviewed. Deliberation happened sans me on the board, and I was unanimously voted as the new executive director. And that was important to me. I was unwilling to take the position if it wouldn't have been unanimous. I felt like the only way that, because of the unique circumstances of having been on the board, that the only way I would have been comfortable taking the position is that if everyone currently on the board agreed that I was the right person for the job. And so that was in June of 21 that I was hired officially for this position, June 1. And so now I'm a year and however many months into the job.
So, and I asked this just to sort of set the context, because both of us have been deeply involved in AFTA's advocacy work, but also in its conservation work. And so, for the benefit of our audience and listeners, walk us through some of what you consider the highlights of AFTA's conservation engagement. And just for full disclosure, Lucas was a consultant to the Marine Fish Conservation Network, helped us with some advocacy work, and also is currently on our National Policy Council, and was on our National Policy Council as a recreational angler expert and outdoor recreation industry expert. So we're very fortunate to have that experience and expertise. But let's talk a little bit about what you see as some of the bright stars of AFTA's engagement in conservation, especially marine conservation. But don't be limited to that, Lucas.
Yeah, well, and so I think there's a story that needs to be told, and it's really the organizational makeup of AFTA and sort of the transition that's happened over the last few years. I will say that, to touch on some of the highlights, AFTA was instrumental in weighing in on some of the more contentious marine fisheries battles of the 2020s, starting in the 2016s, and that revolved around the reauthorization of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. I believe that AFTA was truly instrumental in keeping some nefarious activity from taking place through either bills or language within bills that were trying to undermine what I think is probably the greatest federal fisheries management undertaking of our time. It started in '76 and now it is what it is today. And timely is that Huffman just brought that reauthorization out of committee, and so it still is being reauthorized. But I believe that AFTA was a big part of keeping it safe and making sure that the right components were put into a reauthorization. I don't think we need to get into an MSA class, although I could teach now as much
for sure
time as I've spent thinking about that bill. So that to me was a big highlight in the earlier kind of AFTA's involvement. We now have made a little bit of a transition, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. Is we have a sister organization that's the AFTA Fisheries Fund. That was developed in 2014 as a stand aside sidecar, sort of conservation arm of AFTA. It's a 501c3, whereas AFTA is a C6. So we have the ability to lobby. They don't. They're really more of a nonprofit in sort of that traditional sense. That organization has always just been sort of utilized for grant making and as a pass-through for monies that would go to small projects, which is great. And it was a major part of the Mangrove Project before I was a board member. But in, pre-COVID, because I don't remember now, in the PC, before the PC, we decided as a board to really beef up the sort of the undertaking of the Fisheries Fund and really prop it up to be more successful in that small grant making, but also to allow an executive director of that organization to really focus heavily on the conservation component that AFTA would work on for the fly fishing industry. It also freed up AFTA, which is, which I'm over, to really try and focus on either the policy component of some of these things, because we can talk legislative language, we can lobby, we can, advocate for specific things in bills. And also that we would then focus heavily on trade, and AFTA strategic plan, which I think is important, really focuses on two pillars. It's stewardship and it's trade. And so by giving the Fisheries Fund a leg up and its own executive director, the two organizations can now work together towards one goal, which is to make sure that the conservation components of our fisheries and the resources are taken care of, while those who need to do the right thing on Capitol Hill can be pushed in that direction, as well as we focus heavily on tariffs and taxes and things that are more traditionally trade oriented for the industry. So that I think is an important transition, because it shows that AFTA as an organization is dedicated to conservation so much, and that it's such an integral part of the ethos of fly fishing, that we wanted to give it its own organization to really work on it, so that I wasn't dividing my time in half or more in order to do the things that people think that's also important, and that you really have to have both of those components working together towards a singular goal. So that again is sort of a rambling.
No. It's not rambling. It's good context, but I'd like to dig in a little bit deeper on that conservation work that AFTA is engaged in. And it's important to understand that there are two arms in doing this, right? There's what you just described as the Fisheries Fund, which is on the ground, boots on the ground, waders in the water, hands getting dirty stuff, but not the advocacy. And then you all doing, excuse me, my ship's bell, so apologies. The advocacy stuff and developing those educational elements to that. Tell me a little bit about if there is sort of a, I don't want to say singular, but a main focus of that conservation advocacy. What would it be? Is it climate change?
Climate change, 100%. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So after the battles of the 2016s through 19s around the MSA reauthorization, after,
and we'll come back to that in a second.
Okay, great.
I'll let you, but go ahead and talk about climate change.
Never talked enough about the MSA, so I'm excited to get going on that again. Yeah, so after that sort of battle cooled down because of COVID and other things, the Fisheries Fund needed a focal point, and to me, climate change made perfect sense. It really is the potentially the most catastrophic sort of threat that we face in our fisheries, and it feels like daily there are more reminders of why. And so we believe that it's impossible to have any conversation around a marine or freshwater fishery without climate change being a part of it. And so AFTA and the Fisheries Fund have really shifted focus heavily on climate and trying to get it to become a major component of things like the Magnuson-Stevens Act reauthorization, or the focus of NOAA fisheries and how they're moving forward, and really trying to implement components of climate into all of our fishery management regimes, because without it, we would be missing a major part of the story. And I think we would be completely missing an opportunity to hopefully include science in these decision-making processes. And so that has been a major focus for us moving into today.
And Fisheries Fund still does grant making, though.
They do, absolutely. Yeah, that's and the goal of the Fisheries Fund is really to utilize the work that they're doing in education and philanthropy to prop up and to increase the amount of grant making that they're able to do. I know that when I first got on the board, they were making grants in the $10,000 to $20,000. Last year we granted closer to $50,000. So we're moving up the chain and in opportunity, and the exposure that the Fisheries Fund gets through the work that they're doing on a national or marine level, it only helps to contribute to the ability to make the boots on the ground, waders in the water opportunities happen at a larger scale.
And those are small projects like the Black Mangrove Project. Exactly. and others.
Yeah. For instance, like this past year, we funded Alvin Dito's project of the cleanup they did in the Colorado. So I think it's called the Loco Trash Bash or something like that. And so, those are exactly the types of things that we want to try and fund as the Fisheries Fund, because it shows that there are people out there who are trying to do the work. They just need a little bit of help to get it done. And so we can make those smaller grants that will help directly impact fisheries on, in areas that are in desperate need. And so, that's a big part of.
And I would think part of the education in those grants that, I used to say about teaching people how to fly fish. I'll teach you how to fly fish, but you'll turn into a conservationist. I think if they get these local projects where they're doing either a cleanup or restoration or what have you, it's an opportunity for AFTA to help those local projects expand the universe of conservationists by educating them on the importance of the work that they're doing. And volunteers are really the backbone in a lot of ways for conservation, because they're not getting paid. They're volunteers. They're doing it because they care. And then, they become ambassadors of whatever that project is or whatever that cause is. And so it's a great model that AFTA is using. Obviously, I'm again, for full disclosure, I was on that board for 9 years, so I'm still a huge fan of the work that AFTA does. So I recently saw that there is a new project, Tomorrow's Fish. You want to talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Tomorrow's Fish is a many years project in the making. That specific name, Tomorrow's Fish, was developed by a consultant we had years ago named Reagan Nelson. She was brought in to help AFTA, kind of step into the more national focal points around marine fisheries and other things. And so it during COVID sort of took a back seat and just sort of simmered there on the burner. But recently it has gained new life and a new purpose. And so Tomorrow's Fish initially, it was obviously about conservation and about us all kind of working as one towards a common goal of conservation. But now it really has a much heavier climate focus, just because that is, again, the most, in your face threat that we currently face. And so Tomorrow's Fish is a campaign that the Fisheries Fund is a part of. There are lots of organizations and entities who are all working towards one goal, which is to educate and advocate for climate to be a major component of how we manage our fisheries, and just to get people to understand that it is happening, and that to ignore it at this point would be absolutely devastating. And we continually march towards a time when we won't be able to turn back the clock. And so the urgency is now. And so I'm excited that the Tomorrow's Fish campaign has kicked off. It really comes from, this idea that it's a common thread that runs through all of our fisheries. And, the idea that you can ignore it in one place and not another, it really kind of it's impossible. And so to what you were saying earlier about creating those localized advocates, is that this campaign will hopefully pull all of those localized advocates into a net to make them one loud voice for, this climate thing that is punching us in the face daily. And so, as it continues to develop and we see it grow and mature, I'm excited to say that I think one day this sort of idea of organizing the organizations, bringing together the brands, the advocates, the local folks, the small organizations, the big organizations, that together there's going to be a mass movement. I've always said that on the water, you're not a Democrat or a Republican, you're an angler. And so if we can look past those political sort of impasses whenever we're thinking about something like climate change, it will hopefully unite us past those squabbles that seem to gridlock everything that happens in DC. And so, that's the beauty of being on the water. And Tom, you can attest to this, I know.
For sure.
Is that when you experience a day of fishing with someone, that person becomes a friend, a real friend. And for a different reason. It's not like any other experience I've ever had. It like I say, it taps into your lizard brain. Like
for sure,
to a place that's a whole nother level, and you become close for reasons that don't typically happen. And that, in my opinion, is something that once that passion is ignited, a campaign like Tomorrow's Fish will hopefully make it burn bright enough that people can't ignore it.
Awesome. So I'm going to use that as a segue, but before I say that, we'll put the link to the Tomorrow's Fish website in the show notes. But using that out on the fishing, getting together as a segue, there's an industry summit coming up where you might not get to fish, but you get to talk about fishing and pulling all those kind of things together. Tell us a little bit about what that summit's at, who are some of your notable speakers, what subject matter, is climate going to be part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of working off of the success of our dealer summits, which revolved around retailer education, I wanted to try to put something together for the entire industry. I wanted to try and expand that education and networking opportunity, noting that a lot of the retailers always found it extremely successful to have the peer-to-peer conversations. That was the part of those
like being in the boat.
Yes, exactly. It was really the part of it that superseded everything else we did. The education was nice, but being able to talk to someone else who's in the trenches with you made a huge difference. And so expanding on that, we wanted to create a dealer summit. And so, an industry summit, which invited the entire industry to come together to talk about the big things. Pre-COVID was one thing, post-COVID now, with supply chain issues and everything else that's been happening throughout this pandemic, has really turned a lot of what we knew on its face. And so I believe that AFTA is the conduit for these conversations between these categories. I think that we should be the neutral third party that brings them together, gives them a safe place to have a conversation. And so that's the main purpose of this. It's a thought leadership opportunity. It's a way to bring our industry together to have a conversation in a time when a lot of us have been isolated. And during isolation, rumors start, misinformation is thrown about, and so people think certain things that just may not be true, and it becomes a lot harder to be mad at someone when they're standing in front of you. And so I really want to try to quell some of that. Tom Sadler aside, I've seen you get mad at people plenty in their faces, so I know
you and I have that direct knowledge, don't we?
But the goal is to try and unite the industry in a way that a larger trade event just doesn't do. This is more intimate. It's more one-on-one. And so we're excited to provide that. And yes, climate is a big component of that. We are in Charleston, South Carolina. And so it's impossible, in my opinion, to talk about Charleston or be in Charleston without talking about climate change. Sea level rise is a major issue there, as well as many other things that are happening around all of our coastal environments. And so to go to Charleston and not bring up climate and have it be a major component of this summit would be a miss, in my opinion. And to that end, we're going to really try and bring in some important speakers that I'm excited about. The event runs Sunday. We have a cocktail hour just as a meet and greet. Monday and Tuesday are our heavy days for education and networking. And then Wednesday after has a board meeting. But on Monday, October 17th, we're bringing in Janet Coit, the Assistant Administrator of NOAA Fisheries. She's been gracious enough to give us some of her time. I know she's extremely busy, and we're excited to have her to talk about how NOAA is going to start implementing climate into their fisheries management regimes and try and be a sounding board for her and everyone else on our staff so that she understands that there are recreational anglers out there who do want to talk about this and do have productive ways of communicating. And then
that's great. I mean, Janet was at the recreational summit in Virginia. She's clearly engaged, known her for years, and I'm thrilled that she's coming to AFTA.
Yeah, it was important to me. It was actually the first ask that I had. It was the first person I wanted to get there to the summit. I've only had an opportunity to chat with Janet. It feels weird calling her that, Miss Coit, on just a few occasions, and they were always fleeting. And so I'm excited to be able to sit down with her and have a conversation. Tuesday morning, we're excited to welcome Robert Boyle, the Executive Director of the South Carolina DNR, as well as Andrew, and I want to say his name is Wonderly from Charleston Waterkeeper. They're going to speak together Tuesday morning, talking about the private and public, sort of combination coming together to work on the issues of South Carolina and beyond. And we're extremely excited. And this was a relatively late get, but Congresswoman Nancy Mace is coming Tuesday evening to have a conversation at our happy hour to discuss her being on the Conservative Climate Caucus. And so we're excited to, again, have an open dialogue and welcome her to understand that there are people out there who are willing to have, an amenable and what's the word I'm looking for? Gracious conversation that doesn't involve yelling and screaming and whining and
yeah,
the things that come with that.
I think having Representative Mace is a great, and as you said, a late but great get, in that she can take back to that constituency, her constituency in Congress, her colleagues, probably not constituency, but colleagues, that again, here's a group of reasonable people who have these concerns and have a legitimate business concern, right? I mean, you and I have been through this. It's that these recreational venues, our oceans, are what power this industry. So,
well, and the tagline of this entire event is bridging the gap between economy and ecology. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do, is that I believe AFTA is that bridge between those two worlds, and that without that bridge, it's impossible to really kind of navigate everything that we're dealing with now. And so I'm excited to have all of the guests we have, including the educational opportunities. We have Dr. Andy Danilchuk's going to be there. Matt Mullen, our political advocate, is going to be there. And really the excitement for me with him is that we're going to have an open dialogue. It's going to be not, hey, this is what AFTA's focusing on. It's, hey, what do you want AFTA to focus on? And making an open roundtable so that our members can sit down and actually have a meaningful conversation about what AFTA should be doing moving forward and what policy they think is important.
Well, I think I'm excited. I'm excited to hear more about how it all plays out. We're going to start to wrap up here. Because I've got a noted award-winning saltwater guide here on the show. I know you have prejudice, but if you could fish only one place on the planet, where would that be?
Whew. Is that one place I can fish for the rest of my life, or one place one time?
Let's do it two ways. Let's close out with two questions. Where would you go if you could only go one place for the rest of your life? And if you could go one place on the planet, where would you go?
Honestly, if I could go one place for the rest of my life, I would stay here in Louisiana. There's just too much to do.
I can appreciate that.
Too much to do, too many opportunities. One place, one time. Whew. I've never been to Alaska. I really want to go. Alaska, just to see it,
Well, you know what? We've got a new congresswoman from Alaska who understands fishing, who's good friends with a colleague who is a fly fisher. So maybe we can find an opportunity to get AFTA and others up to Congresswoman Peltola's. So, Lucas, the bright shining face of Colin Delaney has appeared on our screens, which is our way to say thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time. Always enjoyed talking with your brother. I only wish we were doing it over a bottle of whiskey as opposed to over Zoom, but we can remedy that situation sometime in the near future.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, Colin, I promised I'd get us done on try to get us close to time, and here we are. So just to close out, this will be a podcast. You can see the links on our website. It will be on YouTube as soon as Colin can wing to do his absolute magic. And again, thank you. And until next time, have a great day.